Coming up on Network Africa. The U.S. warns of a significant increase in COVID-19 cases in Tanzania. A suspected militant attack in Mali's central Mopti region leaves 20 UN peacekeepers injured. Plus, the United Nations says the threat posed by terror group ISIL to international peace and security is on the rise again. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. A week after the U.S. advised against all travel to Tanzania, its embassy in the East African country says it is aware of significant number of COVID-19 cases since January 2021. A statement from the embassy adds that mitigation and prevention measures against the virus remains limited, warning that Tanzania's health facilities could be quickly overwhelmed if the situation continues. Tanzania is one of the few countries in the world to not publish any data on COVID-19 cases since May 2020. A month later, President John Magufuli declared the country to be free of coronavirus, yet the authorities have continued to give mixed messages about the virus. South Africa is aiming to ship around 80,000 Johnson & Johnson vaccines every 7 to 14 days once it secures the necessary authorization permits for the domestic regulator as part of the country's first inoculations for healthcare workers. Joint lead investigator for the local study, scientist Glenda Gray, says they are open to immunize between 350,000 and 500,000 healthcare workers during an implementation study. This comes as Africa's worst-hit country looks to the U.S. firm after halting its first-choice vaccine, AstraZeneca, following results from a study showing it did not work as expected against a new variant dominant in South Africa.
So we do hope to immunize as between 350 and 500 healthcare workers. Sorry, I'm just saying between 350,000 to 500,000 healthcare workers. And there's no use pouring vaccines into the country and we are unable to deploy them. And so we will receive 80,000 doses every 7 to 14 days. And then based on our ability to roll them out, we will then redeploy them.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says it recommends using the vaccine developed by the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca, even in countries tackling new variants of the coronavirus. The WHO also says the vaccine can be used in people aged over 65, which some countries have advised against. The global health body advises that spacing out the 2 doses, as is happening in the UK, makes the vaccine more effective. The Oxford vaccine is seen as the vaccine for the world, as it's cheap, can be mass-produced, and is stored in a standard fridge.
These guidelines that are being released today are very, very important because the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is one of the main vaccines at this point in the COVAX facility. It's going to be procured in hundreds of millions of doses and distributed around the world. And so many countries will be receiving their first tranches of the vaccine from the COVAX facility later in February. So this is an important milestone, and we hope that this will be followed very soon by the recommendation on the emergency use listing of this product.
Based on the current evidence, SAGE recommends that this vaccine should be administered in 2 doses of 0.5 milliliter each, with an interval of between 4 and 12 weeks between the first and the second dose. And given the evidence that we saw, we realized that extending the evidence between 8 and 12 weeks is the best time really to give a second dose to produce a much better immune response.
Well, let's get more on this story from a senior lecturer of microbiology at the Nasarawa State University, Dr. Akiala Ishaku. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Well, South Africa says the AstraZeneca vaccine is not effective against the new variant of the coronavirus, but the World Health Organization says otherwise. What's your take on this?
Yes, because of the dynamics of the virus and because the RNA virus mutates once it gets into the environment, there will be need for a new generation vaccine that should be able to take care of the South African variant. But nevertheless, vaccines that are available now can be able to reduce hospitalization rate, can be able to reduce case fatality rate, and can be able to reduce severe cases of COVID-19. So I think I shared my thoughts with the WHO that the vaccines that are available are efficacious, despite that they did not kind of cover the amino acid sequence of that of the South African variants. The technology of RNA vaccine is simple. It's just for us to program the RNA chemical synthesis, program the chemical synthesis so that it can be able to synthesize new RNA, and then we should be able to get a second generation vaccine to cover that variant. We should also be able to have a look at a One Health ecosystem dynamics. I'm quite sure that we are also infecting our animals with COVID-19. So have we isolated the variants from animal? Does the vaccine also cover that of animal origin? So these are the discussion that we shall be having in the nearest future when it comes to vaccine development for COVID-19.
Dr. Ishaku, at the moment, there are lots of conspiracy theories over the COVID-19 vaccines, with some countries like Tanzania going as far as advising their citizens not to partake in vaccinations. What advice do you have for people who are skeptical of taking these vaccines as Africa, through the COVAX scheme, seeks to begin its own vaccination program?
I just want to advise African government and African citizens that the vaccines are safe and then they are efficacious. This is because we need to take the vaccines to be able to halt the death rate across Africa. And we should also be able to take the vaccine so that we can reduce our hospitalization rate and also the transmissibility dynamics of this virus. So the vaccines are safe and they are efficacious. We just need to do more. We need, every country needs to kind of set up ambassadors, begin to do more of advocacy, more of risk communication. We need COVID-19 ambassadors across Africa, people that can be able to speak, can be able to convince people that the vaccines are safe. So I think time has come for different countries in Africa to begin to set.
Well, it seems we are having some connection.
They should be able to.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Dr. Ishaku, if you can.
They should be able to sell out this. Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, please go ahead.
So government in African countries need to do more. Government in African countries need to do more, need to kind of set up a vaccine campaign initiative ambassadors, people that should be able to speak to their citizens and then be able to convince them and sell out these ideas to them that the vaccines are safe and they are efficacious. Once we do that, we have the buy-in of the citizens, then I think we are in a very good mode to go, and then we should be able to vaccinate millions of Africans with COVID-19 vaccines. Once we do that, we reduce the hospitalization rate, we reduce the death rate, and we should be able to reduce severity of cases of COVID-19 across Africa.
All right, then, Dr. Akiala Ishaku, thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa. To security matters now. An attack by suspected militants in Mali's central Mopti region has left 20 UN peacekeepers injured, some of them seriously. The injured soldiers are reportedly from Togo. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack, but Islamist militants have regularly targeted peacekeepers and Malian troops in the area. Last week, at least 9 soldiers were killed when an al-Qaeda-linked jihadist group attacked another camp in the same region of central Mali. In the meantime, the UN has strongly condemned the attack in Mali, where 28 peacekeepers from Togo were wounded. The mission in the country described it as a complex attack. Since the beginning of the year, 5 peacekeepers have been killed in Mali and 46 others injured in hostile acts, and that's just since January.
"28 peacekeepers from Togo were wounded when their temporary base located in Kerena near Douentza in north-central Mali was targeted by what our UN colleagues on the ground describe as a complex attack. We, of course, strongly condemn the attack. The UN mission on the ground has taken all necessary measures to ensure that the injured receive prompt and appropriate treatment. We, of course, wish them all a speedy and full recovery. The head of the UN mission on the ground, Mahatma Saleh Anadif, said that for several months now, peacekeepers have been carrying out numerous security operations in central Mali to help reduce violence against civilians and to restore calm in areas where community tensions have been reported. He said they're also working to reduce the threat of improvised explosive devices, which is an issue in that region.
Still on security matters, a top UN official on counter-terrorism says the threat posed by ISIL to international peace and security is on the rise again. In a briefing to the Security Council, the Under-Secretary General of the UN Office of Counter-Terrorism, Vladimir Voronkov, urged member states to remain focused and united to counter it.
The threat posed by ISIL to international peace and security is on rise again. It's critical that member states remain focused and united to counter it, despite the strains and competing priorities brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. While ISIL has not developed a purposeful strategy to exploit the pandemic, its efforts to regroup and to reinvigorate its activities gained further momentum in the second half of 2020. Its core in Iraq and Syria and its affiliates in other conflict zones have continued to take advantage of the disruption caused by the virus to step up their operations with a number of high-profile attacks.
Human Rights Watch has accused the Ethiopian military of indiscriminately shelling urban centers during the conflict in the northern region of Tigray last November. The US-based group says the attacks violated the laws of war and urged the government to investigate. According to the report, homes, schools, hospitals and marketplaces were not spared when artillery was fired indiscriminately towards Tigray's towns and cities. Human Rights Watch alleges that 83 civilians, including children, were killed and more than 300 others were injured. The government has not immediately reacted to the accusations, but has previously defended the conduct of its forces. Still to come on the program. Congo-Brazzaville's President Sassou Nguesso seeks 4th term in office. Details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. The United Nations says a surge in fighting between different ethnic communities in Warab, Maban and parts of Jonglei in South Sudan has caused hundreds of deaths and massive displacement over the past few months. While UN-MISS peacekeepers have increased their presence in patrolling across potential hotspots, Special Representative of the Secretary General, Mr. David Scherer, says much more needs to be done to address the root causes of the intercommunal tensions.
This week we plan to deploy peacekeepers to 7 temporary operating bases across the country. And our feeling very strongly is that if we can deploy early in the dry season, we have a better chance of success to prevent violence before it happens. However, some places have been difficult to reach, and our efforts to get to Romich, for example, in Warrap, has been continually blocked on the ground. In fact, we've got a patrol en route there that's been blocked for the last 5 days. We still wait for those to be appointed. The critical appointments in the current state of subnational violence, the amount of subnational violence going on. We've also got, of course, the issues around the Constitution, the unification of forces. All of these important parts of the peace process are still to be resolved.
To politics now, authorities in Congo-Brazzaville have submitted the names of 8 presidential aspirants to the Constitutional Court for validation ahead of the March 21st election. President Denis Nguesso will face 7 challenges, including former Finance Minister Matthias Dazon and Guy Brice Coleles, the son of a former Prime Minister. The 77-year-old president, who has been in power since 1979, except for a 5-year period after losing elections in 1992, is seeking a 4th term in office. The largest opposition group, the Pan-African Union for Social Democracy, has said it will boycott the polls. The constitution was changed in a referendum in 2015 to remove term and age limits. African Affairs analyst Dr. Okwi Okpala joins us live on the program for more on this story. Dr. Okwi, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
So, President,
good evening, all.
Good evening. President Denis Nguesso of Congo-Brazzaville is seeking a 4th term in office at the age of 77. What new thing do you expect him to bring to the table?
Well, the sad story of Africa is that leaders seek for power, fight to retain power at all costs, not for purposes of bringing development and progress to its citizens, but for purposes of just holding on power and controlling the affairs of men. He has been in power for 35 years, and if he wins again in 2021, he's going to be in power until 2026 for about 40 years. Yet, the citizens of that country are one of the poorest. Majority of them are living below poverty line. In the last election, there was violence. And in this one, is already, people are predicting that it's likely going to be violent. And what you will see is that the election will be rigged. Many of the oppositions will be hunted out. And at the end of the day, he will declare himself winner. Not necessarily because if he has been achieving making great achievements for the country, you will say, okay. But the truth is that in Congo-Brazzaville, the poverty is ravaging the citizenry. Yet the leader has been there for 35 years and wants to continue. And for those 35 years, he has not been able to move the living standard of the citizens up. And the suppression of the human rights records are going lower, and the human rights records are not good at all. So I don't expect anything. He will do everything to declare himself the winner. And then if the opposition, if they protest, probably some of them will be herded into jails. That is a sad story of Africa. That is a sad story about them. With few exceptions, African countries with few exceptions.
Dr. Okwi, you raised some worrying points there. But what can regional leaders do to ensure that this election is free and fair and also free of violence, especially looking at the African Union on their new president, Felix Tshisekedi?
Well, the AU, they are very good in marshalling out protocols and their resolutions and all that will promote democracy, human rights. However, the problem is always in the follow-up. I think Why? And the follow-up has been poor because most of the leaders of Africa are also either desiring to do the same thing, or maybe to hold power at all costs, or to suppress the opposition, or to, because they engage in all these things, it has been difficult for them to stand up against those who have this sit-tight syndrome, and who have no intention of conducting free and fair elections, and who have no intention of quitting when they're supposed to leave. Instead, they manipulate they manipulate the constitution. They want to change the constitution, just like it did in 2015. You have to, by all means, change the constitution so that it will continue to be in power. So why AU, African Union, they should come out and support democracy everywhere in Brazil and in Congo, Brazzaville, everywhere in Africa, because through democracy you have development. But because most of them either have been dictators or they want to be dictators, they have not been very, very, very forward in trying to promote this rule of law.
Dr. Okwi, just to touch on what you mentioned about the sit-tight syndrome, it is common in Africa for leaders to sit tight in office, but we've also seen such cases in China and Russia, and you will recall Donald Trump tried to do the same in the United States. What is responsible for this sit-tight syndrome, and how can it be eradicated?
Well, I think it's in the nature of human beings to want to hold power and control the affairs of men. However, like the American system says, that in Africa, it's particularly so in Africa, but because the system cannot check. The system is too weak to check strong men. But unlike what happened in US, Donald Trump behaved like a typical African dictator who wants to retain power even when he has lost the confidence of the people, when he has lost the support of the people. But you can see also that the American system were able to make sure he didn't remain in power. In China and Russia, yes, those things they cannot be called dictators. They cannot be called democrats, and they are not. However, even though they are using the power for the purpose of the development of their people. And that's why even in China, you can see that China has been growing steadily. Their economy is improving and the people are living better life. Yes, of course, that cannot compensate for freedom. However, what makes the African situation worse is that they are not even using the power to promote economic development. They are not using the power to promote welfare of the people. They are only using the power to be able to control the affairs of men, put those they want to put in jail, and loot the treasury of their countries. That's the difference. But there's tendency of every human being to want to control other human beings, and that's why. But if the system is strong enough, of course, it may not happen. Like we saw in the US, the American system was strong enough to withstand the sit-tight tendency of Donald Trump, and at the end of the day, Donald Trump.
All right, then, Dr. Okwi Okpala, it's always a pleasure getting your thoughts and analysis on situations. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you, and God bless you.
And finally, on the program, police in Madagascar have banned all political rallies in the capital, Antananarivo, ahead of planned protests by the opposition. There are growing concerns in the country over the rate of unemployment and state of the economy. Opposition lawmakers, under the banner of Let's Make Waves Together, have demanded the withdrawal of security forces deployed outside the home of former President Marc Ravalomanana. They also want the Malagasy Broadcasting System, a television and radio station owned by the former president, to be allowed to operate. And that's Network Africa today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shubowale.